Hey, folks, welcome back to. Well, this is technically going to be a movies you might have missed, but uh, we're going to talk about a movie that's really thick, is probably the best way to put it. It's called Primer. You may notice that there's a giant explanatory infograph there on the screen for you. Yeah, good luck, because even with that, we still have no idea how to properly explain this movie. Um, there's so much happening. That timeline will not help you whatsoever in explaining this film in the slightest. But you may have heard that other voice on the line. I am, of course, not here alone for his first time ever doing some specialized content for us here at Words Don't Do It Justice and the Wrath of Ruthless. We have Cliff. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, what's going on? This I don't know why we taking so long to actually do this outside of that one time.
Yeah, we just did the Grammys. That was it.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, wait, we need to start doing more of these feature shows. And I was telling Pablo that I was like, we be like, yeah, let's help each other out, but we don't have fun with it. So I'm like, let's start to do more of these things more often.
Yeah, man. So I don't know how much fun we had with this movie, but
I had a lot of fun commentating on it because I don't know what that was about. Wow. It's like reading a book with missing like pages in between the chapters.
and I get why it was missing stuff, but still, that doesn't make for easy watching. So
No, it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. The
it's
movie's
not, it
like
really
what?
isn't.
It's like what, an hour and 17 minutes long? So
Yeah.
you could have stretched that out to 2 hours, and the 45 minutes of extra could have just been you explaining the transition between the timelines. So as you can see when you look at this chart here, they do so terrible with telling you when you're in a new timeline. You're just in a new one.
This infographic is not from the people who made the movie. This is from people who liked the movie and decided to make this to explain it for you, because otherwise it's impossible. Of course, the movie we're talking about, Primer, came out quite a while ago, but again, some of you millennials might have missed it, so I wanted to go ahead and bring that out here for you guys. Entirely focused on the concept of a realistic approach to time travel and the possible issues that would occur in doing so. They really kind of go out of their way to make it, again, very thick, very obtuse, sort of science-driven plot. You may notice that it occurs over the course of a week. Not really. Nobody ever gets to Friday. In the film, at least.
No.
They talk about Friday. They talk about Saturday. But they never really get there. But that's a lot of the thing about this film. You've got our two main characters, Abe and Aaron, and then just a series of side characters that really only serve to make this movie that much more confusing. But you got two guys that are trying to create some industrial product. At times it looks like it's like a battery. At times it looks like it's some way of doing energy regulation, possibly, some new style of doing cooling. But you don't really get an understanding of what they're doing, other than that this is a side project away from their actual job at a semiconductor company. They are all engineers. And then from there, of course, we get into the accidental first discovery, which seems to be perpetual motion, and the second, time travel. Yeah, go ahead and give your opening thoughts. I would love to hear those.
First of all, the intro part of this movie, which is very important because it really tells you how you're going to get started or what to expect when watching this movie, is very important. And they do nothing but ramble and just passively argue with each other for the first 20 minutes of the film. So you have no idea what the hell is going on. And what sucks is that if you're not really like much of a science major, or any of the variants of science majors, or you're not just adamant in science at all, you're going to miss 90% of the 20 minutes, the start of this movie. So it's very meticulous in its vocabulary. So that's the biggest issue with me, because I'm not a big science person. So you're saying a lot of things that I only had to look up once and never use again. So when you mentioned superconductors, I'm like, no, Can't remember. But if anything, I'd probably punch both those main characters in the face. Like, a lot.
Yeah. But in that heavy science section, we do get some things that kind of come up later in the film and that we'll bring up later in this review because I'm annoyed by them. There's that protein.
I hated that protein.
Like,
I hated that protein. It came out of nowhere. They barely explained the importance of the protein. You speculate a lot in this movie, which is why it's so frustrating because they do so little of putting the pieces together. The conveyance is so poor. It's so poor. So poor.
Well, and that's really kind of the problem. Like, the protein gets brought up as just a way of explaining that time travel has to have occurred because of the amount of the protein that's produced naturally. Okay.
Yeah, from the argon, right?
Yeah, from being in the argon and being in that dark, damp place. That's why the protein existed. But the protein doesn't explicitly show up later, even though they both know about it. Now, I say both very candidly because which of the two of them you're talking about at any one time can flip on a scene's notice?
Literally.
We spent how much of this movie did we spend going, okay, which one is that? This is not a film I recommend to anybody who doesn't want to just have a complete mind job for about an hour and 20 minutes.
It's not a casual watch. It's not.
There's nothing casual. There's nothing casual about this movie at all. Even though they talk very casually about their jobs and what they're doing, but there's nothing casual about what they're doing.
It's a poor movie to watch unless you like want to be a critic like I am and criticize every moment of the movie. But I think it's relatively enough. There was a lot of potential in this movie, though. So despite all of the convolution, it actually was a really good concept to time travel. I like the way that they were doing it with the box and how they have to be very, meticulous in detail about their own personal schedules to make sure that they don't clash with that schedule. They want to make sure everything is remained intact while they do the time jump. And that's very important when it comes to time travel. A lot of movies, games, other forms of media, when they do time travel, it's like they do this thing where it's not just it's very lazy, but it approaches it from a different perspective where, how we believe in the many worlds theory.
Right.
So instead of it just being the same universe, it's just another universe. So this universe can also fall under Schrodinger's cat, which I think is fair enough. So there's multiple universes with multiple different aspects and something could have changed. But this one, they're so meticulous about this one timeline that so happens to happen over 10 different forms because they keep going over and over and over again. But the timeline itself, the events in the first timeline, they want to make sure that doesn't change whatsoever.
Exactly.
And if it does, it has to be something that does not really involve them like interacting with each other whatsoever. They can't interact with each other. You can't just like, hey bro, let me go meet myself and take them to Starbucks. Like, you can't do that at all. You can't answer your own cell phone. You can't meet up with your own wife. You can't hit up your own brothers unless it's like a very specific time and place where you can do that. But other than that, it's very meticulous, and I find that very appealing because it's like, yes, time travel is very dangerous. And you have to be very careful when you're dealing with that. And they just so happen to accidentally build a time machine. So it's like now you're stuck in this position where you got to be very careful. You're stepping on eggshells for something that you didn't really want to build, though. So very strange, very strange. But I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I hated it, but I also enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed the film, but it was like there are points where I was struggling to not start making notes like on a separate sheet of paper. Like, okay, so they have to be here because this has happened, but this hasn't happened. That means this is this time. Like there's a lot of that, like keeping track of time. And I think as a film goer, like I don't know that you could watch this in a theater and be satisfied because I don't know that you could keep up in a theater.
No.
Like here, if it had gotten any worse than it did, and believe me, if they'd have gone 20 more minutes, that movie could have gotten entirely up its own ass. Like, we would have had to like stop, like, okay, what has happened to this point right now? Because something doesn't make sense. Like, it was getting really weird, and then when you finally figure out what has happened that kind of has caused them to want to wind back everything and get around it, like that final moment happening makes a lot of sense, you know, before they kind of try to undo everything. That happens, and, you know, this is a fairly old film at this point. I'm not spoiling, really, but, you know, officially spoiler alert from here, this point forward. So stop now if you don't want any spoilers. But when they get to the point where they're trying to undo the gun situation,
Right.
you realize, like, okay, they've gone far enough forward in the week that this moment has happened, which means that this is the thing that causes everything at the very beginning. And that's when you finally can start to unravel stuff.
Yeah, because they threw it as like subliminals throughout the entire movie. So up until you get to like timeline 10 is when you finally realize, oh, this shotgun scene is the reason why, you know, or potentially, because they don't really give you the answer, but you, like I said, you're speculating throughout the entire movie. So this is what we are speculating, that this is the reason why during one of the timelines why Thomas Granger decided to go back in time. So we're like, okay, so if that's the reason, then they would have to go back in time to stop him from making that decision by fixing a problem that happened with the murder of his daughter. So it's like, wow.
And that only occurs because the version of them that is in that timeline trying to not use the machine to stop Abe from doing the Aaron from doing the punch in the face of Platt, that particular stop happens by them trying to not use the machines, and thus the party occurs that Abe is going to go to, and Rachel gets shot at because Aaron invited Will to the party to keep him from being in the office that day to start the whole process. Yes, folks, that's how thick this is, people. That's how thick this is.
It gets very thick. It's very thick. That part, like I said,
talk about though their job. Aaron and Abe's actors had a lot of heavy lifting in this, and I actually was pretty impressed with what I got out of it. Like,
yeah, because the writing was poor. The writing was super poor. I don't know who wrote this, but you need to throw yourself and the script in the trash.
I think a lot of it was trying to be very scientific without being too specific, because obviously, I mean, it's a movie about time travel from a...
That's ridiculous. It's science. Science is always specific. Like, that's the whole point. We create it to be specific. Like, you can't just be like, I'm scientific, and then get rid of the details, the finer details. That's how we come up with theories in the first place, because we ask a specific question to get a specific answer. You're not going to just throw all of that out just so you can, like, no, like, it's broad. It's so abstract. It's ridiculous.
They have their way of keeping track of if anything's changed is also very weird. But I think that they honestly pulled off something that I didn't expect. Like, I kind of attached to Abe fairly naturally, even though he essentially seems like the fuck up at the beginning.
Yeah, he's nervous, he's twitching, he's uncertain, like, throughout the entire movie. But I guess because he starts to catch on to it, and he sees so many problems that can go wrong with this time machine, is why he's so much more respectable than Aaron is, because Aaron is just going through the motions. Just going through the motions, doesn't even care, making statements, doesn't even, just unbelievable. Abe is like, he's actually understanding how dangerous this is, which is why Aaron was the problem. If anything, he was the damn villain of this damn movie.
Mm-hmm. And you don't really realize that he's the villain until it's the very end, and he's trying to build a bigger time machine. Because let's be fair, he's trying to build a bigger time machine.
No, it's implied. Even in this chart, it states at the bottom he's trying to build a bigger time machine. Yeah. So that was as most certain as we can be about this movie.
Yeah, folks. Again, I know you're probably, if you're on YouTube especially, you're probably trying to analyze this chart. Listen, I mean, you can do that. We're totally for you doing that. But this doesn't help you with the movie. Watching the movie, this chart won't help you.
And what sucks is that, you can't read this chart first, then watch the movie. It doesn't help. You can't watch the movie, then read the chart, because that's kind of defeats the purpose. So it's like, while you're watching this movie, the hour and 17 minutes you're gonna spend there, you're gonna want to rip off some hair. It's so frustrating. The first half, like the second half, does a so much better job of building up to that finale, but the first half is so dreadful. It's like watching the prequels to Star Wars. Like, oh, when I mean the prequels, I mean episode 2 specifically.
There's a couple things that and actually this chart brings it up. The bleeding ears and the handwriting. Now, the handwriting...
Very meticulous.
Okay, the handwriting I get. I totally understand that. But the ears bleeding on Abe's trip, even if that's the Abe that finally ends up in the end, and the Aaron that finally ends up in the end, Abe's ears bleeding doesn't make sense at that point. Are they saying that like each trip gets you to the point where you're close to the ear bleeding, and then after the ear bleeding is the point where you can no longer like write properly? And if so, what is that? Like,
it's got to be a toll. It's got to be a toll on the body, because you're tossing yourself through time. So since we personally don't really know how that trip really goes, like anything can happen during this trip, especially when you're talking about like slipstreaming. Like you don't understand the fabrics of what you're doing as you're sending your body, your matter, from one place in time to another. So I don't expect that trip to be safe or harmless whatsoever. Like, so I feel like, the more times you do it, because it's like Aaron 2, the more it starts to really weigh onto the body, especially because he woke up early.
Yeah.
So, that's what the stopwatch is for.
He's like, that Aaron has to wake up early so that he can beat the Abe, so that he can be there with the Abe that doesn't know that he's traveled back in time more than he has.
That's what I'm saying. So now everything has got to be put in time, because you have to make the timeline very consistent. So that becomes justified, despite the fact that his decision to wake up too early is not. So it's like, the details, the semantics is ridiculous. That's why I don't like time travel. I don't like it because of the semantics. The semantics for time travel is so specific that you cannot get it wrong. The math, you can't get it wrong. Just can't.
But that, of course, brings us back to the thing I talked about during the movie with you. The only way to do time travel properly is to do it one way, stay there, and die in that new timeline, giving yourself the new information. Because otherwise, you make too many changes.
That's the problem, but because they kept doing so many time travels over and over again, especially after the first time when they tested the box. So it's like you already have too many inconsistencies with this. So, they don't understand the scopes of it. So when you send yourself back in time to give the proper information, you can only hope that nothing goes wrong after you apply this proper information, which is why Abe decided to stay at the end of the movie. He said, I'm going to stay here to make sure certain parts of the machine doesn't work, because he knows definitely he can fix this portion that they couldn't fix as long as he remains there. You're right. Definitely you being there and having information is definitely going to be able to fix a timeline during these 5 days, because you already been through the 9 resets.
Yeah, but he's also the only one who can stop them from getting it figured out, because not only would Aaron help them, clearly, because Aaron is probably the one that gave Granger the box information in the first place,
if anything,
but also Abe's the only one who's able to stop the Aaron that eventually, he ends up saying goodbye to the airport in his earlier stuff, from giving them the stuff back, noticing the different changes.
Exactly.
But if that Abe is smart, he would actually just rebuild the box, go back even further, and stop all of this.
That would be another impression, but this would also clash, because Aaron is building a bigger time machine. So, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, even if he finishes that machine and builds it in the current timeline where they're both building this time machine to go back in time, them both going back in time would would defeat. It's a lot. It's a lot. As I'm trying to figure it out, it's like I'm like I figured it's not certain. It's not a certain information that I can provide to really justify the situation, because, like I said, time travel is very specific, and it's unknown. It's a very big uncertainty.
The thing that I got like slowly is that really the trap of how far you can go back has to do with the size of the box and your ability to get oxygen and and food and whatnot, because you can go back basically as far as you can keep the machine running for.
Yeah, because the box technically goes back with you. So the box is the thing that's moving. It's in that space. You create a negative space using this the storage, and you built the box. So the box is technically moving. Yeah. Through this negative space.
If I start the box now, and I know that I get 1,300 loops per minute. If I start the box now on Monday and I run it for 3 weeks, I'm getting years of time.
Right, because of the loop and the math between that will continue the cycle over and over and over again. So you have to get the math right to make sure that you set the box for a certain amount of time, because it lasts over time.
Yeah, it has to go for a certain amount of time, and as long as you're in there as long as you jump in at the right point, you can jump out at the right point and get whatever you want. Which
exactly.
Is, like, that's scary when you think about it. Like that easily could have been a horror movie.
That easily could have been a horror movie, because the moment you open up the box, the negative space is gone, and then wherever time that you decide to open the box, like that's the time you're going to be in.
Yeah.
Well, what's crazy is the fact that the box is there now. The machine is in this time, displaced from its original timeline, now in a place that it shouldn't be in.
Yeah, and whenever that time that the box is up, as long as you're inside the box, you go back to whatever you were.
You know what I'm saying? So now imagine if you time travel in this box, in this storage location, and you time travel so far back that this place hasn't even been built as a storage location. It could have just been like a wall.
Yeah, or just an empty field.
You know what I'm saying? So that you would have to literally figure that out to make sure your placement doesn't get launched you into the middle of nothing but matter, which you would technically die from. So it's like, once again, we're back to the meticulous details about time travel I hate so much about, which is why I told you when we started watching this movie, I said, I don't like time travel.
But here's the other thing. Again, like I said, folks, this is how this movie messes with you. Okay, if the way that they constructed the time machine and the way that they have set the math and do it in the fashion they do can allow them to go backwards the way they do, shouldn't they be able to essentially do things and the math in reverse and go forward?
That's interesting. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I don't know. I can't really debate that because I don't understand quantum physics enough to be able to debate that. So I'm just going to nod and say yes.
I mean, just looking at the way, especially, in Abe's mind, Abe has to be thinking about this, as a way to deal with Aaron. If you can go forward enough as Abe, as into the movie Abe, forward enough to find out what Aaron's plans are, you can then still go back far enough to stop him.
Right, because you have more information, so you...
Yeah, you have more information that way. And because you're using a smaller box, you have less to worry about.
Yeah, in terms of resources, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of still tampers on how far forward he can go. He would have to constantly keep, setting himself up during the forward loop.
No, because
so let's say if he sets it for
if you construct the facility and you put the box there, and even if you're jumping 10 years forward, that's still only a matter of hours of the box running. It only needs to run for 4 days at that point, based on their math?
Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying for him, because it's a smaller box, he can't stay in the box for very long. So he would have to stop the box, leave, get oxygen, come back, set the box again, and then reset over and over and over again until he gets to desired time, whatever that desired time is.
True.
So that he will have to speculate himself, because every time he gets out the box, because it's forward. See, backwards is easier because it's already happened. So you can automatically displace what's already happened because it happened already. Forward is a different case because you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like, I can't. You know what I'm saying?
Except
So
for the first
that,
time when you send yourself forward.
Exactly.
That
so when you send yourself back, so you would have to send yourself forward, then send yourself back. So that's what I'm like. For forward, it's a different debate because we don't really know what happens in the future until we get there. So that time has to already been displaced for it to become the past. So you can then have the information for you to jump to the future. So that's 2 trips.
Which means you need a future version of yourself to come back and set you up to do the forward.
Exactly. So that's 2 more Abes.
Oh my goodness. Oh, my brain.
That's 2 more of yourself. You sending yourself to the future, so your time displaced, that's you that's still here before you send yourself to the future. Then you sending yourself back, that's another one. And then you got to send this one that you already sent to yourself forward to rechange why he sent himself to the future, and to have the information so when he gets there, he already knows about the future. So that's he
has to get the information and not need to make the trip, because essentially that's what you're going forward for in the first place, to create the 2 Abes, one that's already done it and the one that's going back to the past. You have to create the 2 of them to give the one of you that needs to go forward the information, so he doesn't have to go forward.
Except that would only be the blueprint to it, because now we have to consider the idea that him getting sent to the future doesn't mean he has no idea what Aaron has done up until this point, because during the displacement and while he's going through time, a shit ton of could have been changed. So now he has to gather the information, and if he fucks up, he has to send himself back and then send himself to the future again.
You could do another 20 timelines going forward just to get the Aaron stuff right. Or
just to get the Aaron stuff right, and then send yourself back.
Here's my plan. Go forward, find out what Aaron's done, find out where he went, buy a gun, kill Aaron.
But you would have to go back.
I would go back to kill Aaron. I would really wait until the Abe that's in the airport with Aaron that basically threatens him not to come back.
No, you would have to kill him in every timeline. So if you go to the future, you have to kill him then. You have to go back in time, kill him again.
You only have to kill the one that ends the movie. Everything else they do is fine. They need to do all of that stuff. But
no, just the 2, because when you send yourself to the future, that's another timeline.
Yeah, but you need to go back. The you that goes forward in time and sets up for the version of you to get the blueprints. The version of you with the blueprints needs to go back to the moment after Abe and Aaron leave it.
Right, because you want to snuff him right when he starts. Let
that Aaron leave to go, and bang, done. And then Aaron, the future problems of Aaron are over with at that point.
Gone, right.
Because the Aaron that's not going to get the box working is never going to turn into the Aaron that's the problem of the movie.
Right.
And it's so, they're dynamic. The idea that you spent the entire movie with the actual hero and villain and didn't know which one was which for most of it.
Until the end, when you finally realize, okay, now we know where they stand, because why 2 separate Aarons had cell phones. Literally, you become a villain because of one fuck up. That's crazy. That's crazy. And the best part is that's one of the greatest backstories. If they had made a sequel to this movie, that movie would be lit.
Oh yeah.
It would be so good, because this would be the backstory.
Because this is warring time travelers. The future movie is literally warring time travelers.
Literally.
It's Doctor Who on steroids at this point.
Just without all the aliens and
It's just the Doctor versus the Master, literally in locked in time battle. What? How? How did we get to this point?
I don't know.
12 different storylines. Then this 12 different timelines that created this situation. Oh.
And we just sat here and we just speculated all the possibilities, and we barely scratched the surface of what you can do with time travel, which is once again reasons why.
How do you trust any of those Abes and any of those Aarons are the first
You
ones?
You can't. Because you have no real reason, you have no way to displace it because they themselves aren't making any distinguishments. So each Aaron will have a different mindset for how they handle time travel. So the first one was all like, yeah, I'd go back and punch, Platt. But the second one will be like, no, that's a stupid idea. Why would I do that? Because that might come up with and build another frustrating situation where me going back in time ruin that. And then Aaron 3 is like, it's a whole different ball game now. So they all have different mindsets for how they're going to deal with the time travel. So which is what I'm saying, even when you go back in time to fix it, you have to remain in that timeline to make sure you keep it fixed, because you can't really trust yourself anymore because your mindset has changed every time you've done the reset.
Exactly. Now, my thing is, the reason why I say I don't trust that any of those are the first Abe or Aaron is I think that things actually start diverging before we get the first Abe appearance in the time machine. I think that things actually start dividing when they first figure out that the Weeble is getting the protein on it.
Mm-hmm. But you have to ask yourself, how did they get that information?
Exactly.
How did they get that information? How did they know?
What if Platt is really just future Aaron that's gone back that far to screw them out of their stuff? Or future Abe trying to stop them from getting to this point?
It's all speculation. That's what I'm telling you. That's all speculation. All of it. And beautiful, wonderful speculation, great for conversations. Hell, but at the end of the
what if it's
day,
one of the other guys in their group
don't do
actually did it?
Do not do that. That's the worst thing you can do, is start throwing in other people.
They have two more guys. And you can't tell me in one of their timelines, the two of them didn't accidentally come over to the garage early and find all the plans and the manifest and use the boxes. That has to have happened in some version of these timelines.
Yeah, you're right. You can't not consider it. You just can't. As you're doing this process, you have to consider all possibilities, and all possibilities comes with speculation and assuming. So with that situation, that's why he told them, make sure when you go back in time to not have your cell phone. And that's when he said his phone was ringing, he asked you, how do cell phones work? Because you have to consider that. If they call this number, do both phones ring?
Well, and see, that's one thing I think the movie gets wrong on the science end. Okay. So yes, it goes for the first phone, but the phone, like his phone, has traveled back, whereas the other phone is actually there, which should mean his phone should not essentially have the same signal and attach to the towers in the same fashion. I don't think his cell phone should have rang.
Elaborate.
Okay. I call you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I get a voicemail. I leave a message. You call me back to the same to my actual phone number, my normal phone number.
Right.
Well, two of my phones have two separate, SIM cards in them. Like
right.
I have dual SIM phones. So
right.
If you call me and somebody else is calling me on the other SIM card, you're both going to go to voicemail. It's not going to let me take two separate calls at the same time.
Right.
From the separate SIMs.
Right.
It's the same situation here. These two phones are the same registered number.
But it's only going to pick up one phone, so his phone technically wouldn't be able to ring.
His phone shouldn't be able to ring. Also, if it could ring, it should send both phones to voicemail. It should send the call to both phones' voicemail, not to them directly. And he would already have that voicemail because it occurred in the past. Like his phone should pop up with a voicemail, not with the actual call.
Right.
Because
right.
the phone that it should contact should be the one that it knows where it's registered on the system, and it should hit those. It shouldn't hit his phone, which is oddly the same number in a separate place. It would be like call forwarding. If you stop your call forwarding to another phone, that phone's not going to continue ringing, after you stop the forwarding. It's only going to be that initial phone's like ringing for that call. So
right,
it shouldn't have rang.
Right.
It shouldn't have rang. What it should have popped up is a voicemail specifically showing like what that call was about.
Like worst case scenario, it should have just been voicemail.
Yeah.
Okay. See, look, we out here learning science, even in this video. Like this is great. This is great.
Like,
wow.
The fact they dealt with that question of how the cell phones work, just like that brings it up a bit for me.
That's what I'm saying. That the question I thought was very important. I was like, the fact that he asked that question is why I love Abe, because Abe is covering all the bases.
Yeah, because Abe doesn't want to screw up. Abe wants to get this thing right. Oh man.
So Primer, 4 out of 10. Would never watch it again. just would never watch it again. Definitely a once in a while trip. If you have a buddy like Matt here, you could definitely talk about it, discuss it for like an hour, and then possibly forget it ever happened again until you have to deal with time travel again. And then you could come back and possibly reference this movie. But other than that, I would not watch this movie again.
Yeah, this is gonna be one of those. I'm happy with the film as far as that was an interesting, strange trip through a more scientific approach to time travel. But I can't recommend this to people to check out. I'm not going to talk about this on social media kind of situation. Like this was one of those movies. It's like, all right, I saw it. I lived the experience.
I did it.
I did it. Yeah, but it doesn't go beyond that for me either. But look out for some more stuff coming up, folks. We've got Coherence with Rain coming up. We've got Triangle, which is a British film. These are all like trippy time displacement based films. So like I said, the next one's Coherence with Rain, and then of course my partner in crime, Chris Hines, is going to be back, and we're going to actually be watching Triangle, and that's going to be rather ridiculous as well. So I may flip those around. I may have Coherence with Chris Hines, and I may do Triangle with Rain. But we have 2 more time travel related movies coming up for you guys that you probably haven't seen yet. So 4314 Publishing, and this time for Geek Street Radio. I am the Ruthless Wonder, not a Ruthless Wonder. You've been watching Movies You Might Have Missed and Millennials Movies You Might Have Missed. So check us out next time. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Stay black or fresh if you're not black.
Later, guys.